Good morning. Good to see you guys. Such a fun time of year. We are launching back into fall, the new school year. Tons of incredible things coming up, like groups and Rooted and SHS coming back. There's one thing that I just wanted to reiterate that Jess talked about in our announcement segment, and that is Guys Night is coming up here very soon. And man, I just want to encourage you to get registered for this thing because it's going to come up quick. We are probably going to sell the event completely out. And I know we've sort of generically teased out what is going to happen, but let me just give you a few specifics. There is going to be a smoked barbecue buffet. There's going to be a make-your-own mac and cheese buffet. There's going to be an ice cream sundae buffet that's happening. There is going to be a three-point basketball shootout. There's going to be an axe throwing wall. There's going to be a mini golf chipper. Plus, once you get inside to the service, we've got incredible worship and some performance things. We're going to have a speaker. We're going to have a man panel talking about what it means to have friends as a man. I'm telling you, it is going to be an incredible night, and $30 is a steal of a deal for everything we are packing in to this evening. And so, man, if you are a guy in here, get yourself registered. If you are sitting next to a guy, nudge him, make him get registered, okay? Dads, this is a great thing to bring your kids to. Grandfathers, your sons and grandsons. Maybe you're just like, listen, I'm just a single dude. Grab some tickets for the people that you work with, that you hang out with, your neighbors. It's a great excuse just to get people together. And I'll tell you, one of the most difficult things for men is making really good friends that share your values. And that is what this event is really going to be geared towards. And I'm telling you, if you sign up and you make it out, you are not going to regret it. It's going to be absolutely life-changing. And so I just want to give that an extra plug because it is a huge deal. Do not let somebody else steal your ticket, okay? Make sure you get in and make it happen today. Well, we are continuing on in this series that we started a long, long time ago, since before some of you were born. It feels like that, right? It's been a long series, an 8-week series, which we don't typically do, called The Thing Behind the Thing, where we're talking about why everyone does everything they do. And really the idea, the heart behind this is something the Apostle Paul said quite famously. We talked about this all the way back in week 1, this idea where he says, like, I don't understand myself. Like, I do things that I don't want to do, right? I want to do the right thing, but I don't do the right thing. I don't want to do the wrong thing, but I do the wrong thing oftentimes. And I'm confused by myself because I've given my life to Jesus and I'm trying to live right, but oftentimes I'm sabotaged by things deep within me that I don't understand. And I think in addition to this, there's this idea in the Proverbs. Maybe you've heard this before, or your parents, if you grew up in the church, had a pillow with this embroidered on it, like train up a child in the way they should go, and when they get old, they won't depart from it. And really, in reality, training is experiential, right? The things that we experience sort of train us to operate or react in certain ways. And a lot of training isn't intentional. It's accidental, right? We conform to the sort of environments we grow up in and the mentality that we experience and the relationships that we have. And so a lot of us have gotten imprinted in our childhood, and these imprints of not getting certain needs met that are core to our humanity have created within us a longing that causes us to sabotage ourselves in ways we don't want to, in ways we hate that we're doing. And you probably had these moments where you're just like, why did I do that? And if you haven't, you've definitely had moments where other people around you were like, why did you do that, right? And maybe you don't even know. And I think a lot of this is because there's a primal question that is driving your behavior. And when we look to God, we see that he answers these questions deep within us as we build a relationship with him. And so we've just been unpacking them one at a time. And we are all the way on question number 5 of 7. And so I want to encourage you, take some notes today, write down some things that stand out to you. If this isn't your question, it's somebody's that you know. And you want to know how to interact with them and hopefully better understand them. And if you're taking notes today, the title of my message is, It's Just a Game. It's just a game. I don't know if you've ever, if you're a game-playing family. How many of you're a game-playing family? You like board games, card games, any sort of thing like that? My family is definitely a game-playing family. We always play games. We got into a pretty rousing round of Phase 10 yesterday. I don't know if anybody knows about it, but I did dominate. It was an amazing afternoon, and we always play games, but I don't know if you've ever had an experience, because this definitely happened in our household before, where you've been playing a game, and maybe it's this big board game, and it's all spread out, and everybody's invested and involved, and maybe it's a game that drags on for, a half hour, an hour, 2 hours. It just keeps going, but you're eating snacks, and you're into it, and you're having conversation, and people are laughing, and the game, you can tell, is sort of like steering in one certain direction, and it looks like, man, these people are going to win, and this person or these people are not going to win. Maybe there's a little bit of trash talking. Maybe some people are poking fun, but for whatever reason, the game does not go the way that maybe one or two people in the game that really care about the game want it to go, and they get frustrated. In fact, it peaks. They become furious, and one little move, one more card drawn that they didn't want to, one more little snide comment from a sibling, and all of a sudden they're enraged. This has happened to my house before, and I won't tell you to whom, okay, because I don't want you to judge my family, but somebody has jumped up and flipped up the board and run out of the room and mumbled something as they were leaving the room, like, right? It's never like, you can never understand what they're saying. And everyone else is just sort of sitting at the table being like, oh, what just happened? What in the world just happened? And maybe from that point on, every time, maybe this person was you, maybe every time anybody is like, hey, we should play a game, the people are like, hey, you should just know, while they're in the bathroom, they're very competitive. Okay, you should just know. It is whatever it is. It doesn't matter. They're like, well, this is checkers with a 2-year-old. And they're like, they don't care. Okay, it is going to be a big deal to them. And if you've ever been sitting in the aftermath of a moment like this, where somebody sort of flipped out because the game didn't go their way, I wonder if you ever sat back and analyzed this moment. Like, I think I've been sitting in the aftermath of a moment like this and realized that, there's a fundamental difference between me and them, in that I was playing to win, but they were playing for worth. And there is a difference in how we approach things. Some of us, we want the win. Others of us, we feel like we need the win. Like, we don't know how to lose. We can't let ourselves lose. We can't afford to lose. There's something absolutely disgusting and detestable about not winning, and it really doesn't even matter what the thing is, because in your mind, you are only as valuable as your latest victory. And we all know people like this, right? We all know people who are incredibly driven, who insist on being the best, who need to be impressive and admirable and successful. They just wonder, why would anyone do anything that they are not awesome at? That doesn't even make sense. Doing things just for fun is ridiculous, okay? You know what's fun? Winning. Every time I win, I have a blast. And if you really want to make someone mad that has this mindset, just go ahead and tell them when they're really into something, hey, calm down, relax. It's just a game. The scoreboard doesn't matter. We're just having fun. And you know what they're thinking? Liar. The scoreboard does matter. It's the biggest deal here. In the words of the prophet Ricky Bobby, if you are not first, you're last. Second place is just the first loser. Everybody knows that. Being average is absolutely intolerable. And so maybe you're wondering, how do you get this way, right? How does this end up happening to you? And oftentimes, people who end up this way as adults grew up alongside parents who had super high standards. And if you did well, you were celebrated. And if not, oftentimes you were ignored. Oftentimes, this highly competitive nature unfolds in households where sibling rivalry is encouraged and failure is not an option. And if you don't succeed, you don't exist. And maybe in your family, the thing was athletics, or maybe it was academics or music or money. But now, as you fast forwarded through your life and you've had more existence under your belt, you've come to realize that everything is an opportunity for excellence. Loading the dishwasher, mowing the lawn, organizing your closet. Because in your head, anything worth doing is worth doing perfectly. You do this because potentially the question driving a lot of what you do is the fifth primal question: am I successful? Am I successful? Am I talented and accomplished enough to earn others' admiration? Will people want anything to do with me if I don't deliver in whatever situation I find myself in? Don't I need to seem impressive in order to keep others interested? Because if I'm not doing something amazing, why would anyone want to be around me? And maybe there's a lot of you in this. Maybe there's a lot more of you in this than maybe you even knew or intended or hoped, but maybe it's sort of imprinted on you. And maybe you're at a stage in life where you don't flip game boards over anymore. You still want to, but you've learned to sort of tamp that part of you down. But what is true about you is you still hate to lose. It's the most frustrating thing you could think of, which is why you never give anything less than your best to anything. You feel obligated to squeeze the most out of every single opportunity. And when you go to something, if you're there, you feel like, well, hey, if I'm here, I might as well make it better, right? That's what everybody wants, is to be better at everything they could do, to be the best. I'm sure the people that are in charge of this thing would want to know everything they're doing wrong. And so I'm going to do them a favor in letting them know. And you're not mean, right? You just have really high standards that you wish everybody else understood and played by. And being this way probably has made you successful, but it's also taken a toll. Because when you live with this question in the core of your soul, it's hard to shut your brain off. When you're supposed to be hanging out with friends or family or, sleeping, your brain is just going and going and going. You often get lost in your work and lose track of time. Maybe you even forget the commitments that you've made to others outside of work because the work takes precedence. Sometimes those that are close to you even accuse you of caring more about it than them. But in your mind, you're like, yeah, but I'm doing it for them. And yes, it is exhausting at times, but what else are you going to do? You are the one who makes things happen. And sure, sometimes you wish you could just try things for fun without, having to prove that you're awesome at it. You wish that you could not feel like a failure even when you win, because there's a part of your brain that's like, yeah, you could have done better. You wish that you could still believe that your life is good even when your job is not. You wish you could ask for help without feeling completely incompetent for having asked. You see, when am I successful is your primal question, you have a series of impulses that arise from within you that you may not even want to do. First of all, you have this impulse to see everything as a competition that you must win. And it really doesn't even matter what it is. Pick up basketball, a work initiative, a game of Uno with your grandchildren, an argument with your spouse, a discussion online with a stranger you will never meet. You're like, I must win. You can't let it go. Your impulse is to assess worth according to achievement, because in your mind, what you've done is who you are. This is sort of the natural way you think. If you want me to respect you, you need to prove to me or demonstrate to me why you have earned it, what you have done to achieve it. Because in your mind, obviously, those who accomplish more are better, and those who accomplish less are lazy. Your impulse is to do almost anything to appear successful, because you have to keep up appearances no matter what. You got to do the right things and dress the right way and check all the right boxes. You can't let anybody see you fail or fall short, because what would they think and what would that mean? Keeping up the facade is how you keep others interested. Your impulse is to despise being questioned or critiqued, because you think like the only reason why anyone would do either of those things is to let you know that they don't think you're doing a good enough job, which is offensive. Like clearly, the only reason why they're critiquing or questioning you is because they're implying that you're a failure, or you don't belong, or you're not smart enough to figure this thing out for yourself, which is why they're jerks. Your impulse is to view downtime as a weak and worthless waste of time. Like you have trouble sitting still. People are like, it's your day off, what are you going to do? And you tell them a list of work that you hope to tackle. Every free moment in your mind needs to be aimed at a goal. There's this ever-present to-do list in your head, and it's irresponsible just to lay around when you could be up, sharpening a skill or somehow getting ahead. It always gets really quiet in here after this part when people are like, uh-oh, this is me. Or like, I was convinced it wasn't until you started talking, and now I feel scared for myself. But I gotta tell you, if this is your question, you are in good company. Some of the most significant figures in biblical history struggled under the weight of this question as well, including the person that was labeled as the wisest man in the Hebrew Scriptures, what we now know to be the Old Testament. His name was Solomon. And we're going to look a little bit at his story today. Hopefully there's something you can glean from it as well. And here is what this guy, if you're not familiar, wants you to know about him. This is something that he wrote about himself. Ecclesiastes chapter 2, beginning of verse 4. He says this: I built huge homes for myself, and I planted beautiful vineyards. I made gardens and parks, filling them with all kinds of trees. I owned large herds and flocks, way more than anyone else before me. I collected great sums of silver and gold. I hired wonderful singers, and I had many beautiful concubines. I had everything a man could desire. Now, clearly, just by reading this, if you know nothing else about this guy, he is obsessed with being a success. And he wants everybody who is willing to listen to know just how successful he is. And this is how he defines success: achieving all you can to earn the adoration and accolades of others. Success in his mind is achieving all you can to earn the admiration and accolades of others. And here's what's crazy. He did do that, right? He became successful according to his own definition. And a lot of the things that he did are so massive and so big, it almost seems like, geez, I want to be successful. Well, that's overkill. That's almost too much. But he couldn't stop himself. When he got to one goal, he had to set another. Enough was never enough. How American is that? And, he was successful, and not even just by his own estimation. Objectively, this was true. Like, here's what somebody else wrote about him. Maybe you're just like, sure, he said he was successful. What did other people say about him? In 1 Kings chapter 4, this is what someone else wrote about his life. Solomon's dominion extended over all the kingdoms west of the Euphrates River, and there was peace on all its borders. He had 4,000 stables for his 12,000 horses. He spoke with authority about all kinds of plants, from the great cedar of Lebanon to the tiny hyssop that grows in the cracks of a wall. And he could also speak about animals, birds, and fish. Kings from every nation sent their ambassadors to listen to his wisdom. Just imagine these people being like, thanks for selecting me for this, O king. What did the wise one have to say to you, my servant? Well, he really likes plants and animals. He talked a lot about that. I now know a lot of things that I did not know before. I don't know if any of it's helpful. I know hyssop can be made into a tea that helps with respiratory issues, and I now know that hyenas, that the females are more aggressive than the males. We're never going to use this stuff. Stop sending me there, please. Don't even get me started about the songs. Verse 32 says this: Solomon composed 3,000 proverbs and 1,005 songs. How incredibly specific. Do you really need credit for the last 5? You just round it to 1,000? How badly do you need people to acknowledge what you've done? Also, I think it's interesting. There is no mention of these songs being good, just that there was a lot of them. There's so many of these songs. The truth is, they were probably pretty plant heavy, right? Girl, no matter how much you kiss up, you know you're not getting my hiss up. You know, they're not hits, okay? They're not going to be top 20, but he kept cranking them out. And he wanted credit for every single one. And what's interesting is Solomon, in all of his pursuits, like he doesn't really appear to define success in the same way that his father did. Because here's what his dad told him on his deathbed. His dad was King David. And this is what he says to him about being a good king, about being a good man. In 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 2, he says, "Take courage and be a man. Observe the requirements of the Lord your God and follow his ways." In fact, I think you could summarize David's overall idea of success by something that the Old Testament prophet Micah wrote. Micah chapter 6, verse 8. He tells us to do what is right, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. If you look at the life and times of David, he didn't always get it right, but this is what he strove for. This appears to be how he defines success. In other words, real success in the mind of David was doing the right thing, being kind and forgiving to others, and prioritizing a relationship with God. And I think this is a brilliant definition of success, but it's one that we don't often grab hold of. I think oftentimes it's so much easier for us to define success like Solomon instead of like David. And when you look at this list, you realize not really Solomon's focus. In fact, his first order of being king was not to build a great relationship with God, was not to, be humble, was not to do the right thing, was not to be kind and forgiving. His first order of business as king, when he got to be in charge, was to do exactly what God told him not to do, multiple times. 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 2 says this: "The Lord had clearly instructed the people of Israel, of which Solomon is their king, you must not marry foreigners, because they will turn your hearts to their gods. Yet Solomon insisted on loving many foreign women." Some of you are like, how many is many? He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and they did turn his heart. He was not completely faithful to the Lord as his father David had been. Maybe some of you are wondering, like, why did he do that? Like, why did he move in such a different direction than his dad advised him to? You see, I think a little bit of context is helpful here. Historically, a king married foreign royalty to create alliances. It was more about power brokering than it was about love, which means that, like, having all of these wives and concubines, it really wasn't about having sex. It was about ensuring success. Because the more prominent women he married and the more children his concubines produced, the more wealth and power he possessed. And it gave him the feeling of being successful. And it isn't what his dad told him to do. But I don't know if you've noticed this about parent-child dynamics. When it comes to our parents, we don't really do what they say. We react to what we see. And some of us grew up with parents who said one thing but kind of did another thing, right? Who were like, definitely do this. And you're like, but you are. And so the question is, despite what David said, what did he do? Now, he really was a man of integrity, but as a kid, when you are observing your parents, a lot of times you don't see the private, very intimate relationship they have with God. You see their success. You see how they're viewed in public. That's what you take in. And so, what was David like? Well, to give you a little bit of background on David, famously won a war by killing a giant that nobody else could even face. And it turned the tide of history. He became a brilliant military strategist that was recognized by almost the entire known world at the time. He freed his people from their longtime oppressors, the Philistines. He united the scattered tribes of Israel, and he was able to merge them together into one cohesive nation. He built the capital city, which is now, even to this day, still nicknamed after him, the City of David. Everyone loved him. Kings, noblemen, outlaws. Everybody thought this guy was incredible. And he was a self-made billionaire who started as a broke shepherd and died with an estimated net worth of $200 billion. And if that wasn't enough, he was a poet. And he wrote lots of music that people really liked and sung, and most of it was not about plants. He played the harp incredibly. It's too much. You ever come across someone and they're telling you all the stuff that they've done? You're like, this is too much for a person. It's too much for one. You back it off a little bit. That's so much stuff. In fact, it says this in 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 14, that David succeeded in everything he did, for the Lord was with him. And what it's saying here is that he looked successful to other people, but he was successful even by his own definition, which was different than the world's definition, because the Lord was with him. Because this is what he prioritized in his life. Now, I want you to think about who David is and what David did, and imagine that you are his son. That is a huge shadow to live in. That's an enormous legacy to live up to. It would feel like no matter what you did, you would never be as good as your dad. That every room you walked in, that everyone was automatically comparing you to him. People always talked about him like he was perfect, but he wasn't. He made mistakes. Although the only mistake anyone ever seems to want to talk about is the one time he let his passions get the best of him and he murdered a guy and had an affair with his wife. And guess what? It was your mom. That's how you got here. You were the one mistake your dad made. At least that's how it felt. Solomon wasn't even supposed to be king. He was third in line to the throne. And his brothers are talked about in depth in the Old Testament. They were talked about as being handsome and brave and charismatic. You know the nicest thing people said about Solomon? He's smart. Specifically when it comes to plants and animals. As he told you about the hyssop, he loves the hyssop. Solomon was a peaceful and wise man in a culture that really only celebrated warriors. But when his brothers died, his father hands him the crown, and Solomon sets out to prove everyone wrong who ever doubted him. And here's what's crazy. He pretty much did. He says this about himself in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 9. I became greater than all who had lived in Jerusalem before me. You know what I think when I hear that? You mean your dad? I think Solomon spent his entire life chasing the shadow of his father. And I wonder how many of us, we are doing the same exact thing. We're trying to get out from underneath it. We're trying to prove we are good enough for it. We're trying to prove that we are different than it. But despite everything that he did and everything that he accomplished, he says in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 11, but as I looked at everything I had worked so hard to accomplish, it was all so meaningless. In other words, he did everything he set out to do and even more, but his life still felt pointless and empty. And what made it even worse was remembering how fulfilled his father had always seemed to him. And if you were Solomon, you would just chalk that up as another example of how you do not measure up to your dad. But I got to tell you, what, in my opinion, makes these two men different wasn't what they accomplished. It was where they sought acceptance. You see, Solomon fixated constantly on how he looked to others, but David fixated on how God looked at him. Solomon wanted to look impressive, but David wanted to live with integrity. Solomon obsessed over the destination he wanted to get to, and David seemed to genuinely enjoy the journey. And as a result, Solomon's legacy was being successful, but David's was empowering others to be successful. And he accomplished this by doing the right thing and being kind and forgiving to others and prioritizing a relationship with God. And he was successful, not because of what he did, but because of who he was and the integrity with which he lived. And also, he was fun. Sometimes I think we equate integrity with boredom. And so they have so much integrity, you're like, oh, so not fun then, huh? But that's not the case here. David had high integrity, but he was also enormously enjoyable to be around. There's so many stories about David talking and laughing and dancing and feasting. And some of you are like, those are also my favorite things. Specifically the feasting. And I think there's these stories in here existing because I think in so many ways, as a man after God's own heart, David understands that loving life isn't about accomplishments, but relationships. Relationships that require us to be fully present and entirely ourselves. And I got to tell you, you will never experience the kind of connection and fulfillment you are after if it is built on a facade of your own accomplishments. The only thing that really truly feels meaningful is being known for who you really are, being present in those moments, and knowing that you are loved and accepted as is. And I bring all this up today because I wonder if God may want to rearrange your definition of success. And I wonder how free you might feel if he did. Jesus once famously said this in Matthew chapter 16, verse 26, "What do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul?" And the word soul here means the sum of who you are. Like when you compile everything that is true about you, that composition is your soul. And what Jesus is saying here is, you know what's hollow? What's hollow is stacking up successes, but never feeling comfortable in your own skin, or allowing yourself to be loved for who you are, not what you do. And I got to tell you, all the success that you can muster, even though you're wondering if you're successful, here's why you're wondering if you're successful. Because in your mind, success equals love. If I prove that I'm awesome, you'll be forced to love me. You might not say it like that, but that is how it feels. When you accomplish something and other people admire you for it, it feels like love. But true love is when you are who you are, when you relax into yourself, when you show the people around you who you really are, when sometimes you are sitting in the middle of a moment where you are not quite winning, and those people love you and embrace you and see you and celebrate you, not because you have done something incredible, but because you are who you are, and they choose you. So this is your homework today. If this is your question, here's what I want to challenge you to do. When you find yourself fixating on achieving the admiration and accolades of others, remind yourself that real success is doing the right thing, being kind and forgiving to others, and prioritizing a relationship with God. This is why I meet so many people who have accomplished so many things in their life and stacked up so much money in the bank. And they're like, why do I feel empty? It's because these are the things that actually lead you to feel successful despite what the world tells you it means to be successful. I wonder what would happen in your life if you were like, you know what, instead of spending all my spare time trying to earn and prove, if I invested myself into a relationship with God. If instead of trying to like scheme as to how I could make a little bit more, save a little bit more, put a little bit more away, make a better deal, get this thing. What if it was scheming to be like, how can I be kinder to the people around me? How can I be more forgiving when I don't feel like it? What is the right thing, not the most necessarily efficient thing or the thing that will make the most money? What is the thing that is truly right in this moment? And if this is a question of somebody that you know, this is their question, when they seem overly fixated on being successful, I would challenge you to encourage them to find joy in the process, not just the end product. There's so many people who have accomplished amazing things, and they hate it every step of the way. It's Olympic season. Anybody caught up watching the Olympics? And like, I love the backstories of all these people. And some of them you're like, wow, you run because you love it. And other people you're like, you hate running, but you're good at it. And it's the only way you think people will like you. Those are different things, and they produce different things within us. I would also encourage you to remind them that your interest in them isn't based on how impressive they seem. I can tell you, I have moments with my friends where I feel like I have to perform, or I have to be clever, or I have to be smart, or I have to be funny in the moment, or they won't want me around. And one of the most meaningful things that some of those people have ever told me is where I'm like, I'm not really feeling it. And they're like, hey, you don't need to be anything other than you right now. You don't need to be impressive. You don't need to be accomplished. You don't need to be smart. You don't need to have the right thing to say. You don't need to be the wittiest person in the room. You can just be you in a bad mood. And I'm still in. I'm still in. I choose you. And I wonder what would happen if we allowed God to shift our definition of success and we allowed ourselves to lean into Him to answer this deep question within us. I think it would change everything around us. And whether this is your question or whether you just relate to pieces of it, I think there's something that God wants to do in you as a result of this. And I want to pray that into your life today. Would you bow your heads across this room with me this morning? God, I know you see every single person here. I know you know our stories. You see our hearts. You know our minds. And God, I pray in this moment that you would allow us to see ourselves as who we are. To see maybe our own deficiencies. To realize that the only reason we can ever be successful at anything is because you have empowered us and made us with gifts and abilities and a personality to be successful in a given environment. God, I pray that that is not what we believe is required of us to be loved, to be wanted, to be desired, to fit. But God, that we would understand that love is given to us based on who we are, not based on what we've done. God, I pray that you would alter the definition of success in our mind, in our gut, that you would empower us to be countercultural, that you would make us into people that the more we lean into you and your word and your way and your power in our life, God, that the more that we would find ourselves choosing the right thing, even over the efficient thing, that we would be kind and forgiving to those around us, that we would prioritize a relationship with you, and that it would transform how we experience life. That at the end of our days, we wouldn't look at everything that we've done and think, man, it's so meaningless. We would say, I can't believe I've gotten to live this life, to have these relationships, to feel this way, and to know that I'm loved. It's in Jesus' name we pray. And everybody said, Amen. Amen.